Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 34 of Hot for Teacher. What, you may ask, is Hot for Teacher? What is this thing that I'm watching? Well, Hot for Teacher is a write-in relationship discussion show. I used to call it an advice show, but honestly, I don't know that I give out that much advice. And really, I feel like it's better to just get an opportunity to hang out and talk about things than it is to give out advice, right? I'm not telling you how to handle your players in your role-playing game. We're talking about relationships, and sometimes there's no easy answer, right? Sometimes there's no like, clearly, this is what you should do. And frankly, even those questions, many of the questions that I get, even when they're massive blocks of text that explain everything about the issue at hand, I still feel like I don't have the subtext. So what I want to do with this show, the plan for Hot for Teacher, is that every week I answer 3 questions. We discuss 3 things submitted by you, the audience, to my website, www.adam-coble.com. If you go there and you fill out the form and you talk to me about whatever your issue is, then every time we do an episode, I pick 3 of them and we discuss it. And sometimes there's advice in there. Sometimes it's just kind of a space to wander around in and talk about these things. Hot for Teacher, we discuss friendship and love and work relationships. We have one of those questions today. Sometimes we talk about sex stuff. But the idea here is that this is just the beginning of a longer conversation, either with me and you, or you and people that you care about, whatever. I just want to normalize talking about relationship stuff and talk about all the different kinds of relationships that we might have. So the first question today comes to us from Alex. And Alex is having some young gay trouble, which I'm sure many of us, myself having been a young gay at one point, have had. So this is really a question about relationships with one's parents. So Alex says, sorry in advance, because as I'm writing this, I don't really know what my question is, but I would like to hear your thoughts. So I'm not straight. I found out about 5 years ago, 19 now. I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but I found out about 5 years ago. Since then, I've come out to some family members over the course of time, one of my brothers, my mom, my stepdad, but I haven't ever felt like it was appropriate or a good time for me to talk about it with my father. As the years went on, I stopped viewing myself as closeted, but I'm not out per se. I'm not sure if I'm ever really going to feel out. Whenever the topic of relationships comes up with my dad, I feel like I have a responsibility to bring up my sexuality and come clean, I guess. It's like I owe that disclaimer to him, regardless of how he receives the news. I'm not certain if I have any obligation to let him know, but it still feels cruel to one day maybe blindside him when I bring a guy home. Do I owe him, as a parent, that knowledge? Is this going to have to be my own judgment call? Do I have the right to just never mention anything? So, okay. So first of all, I love the phrasing of this, right? Like, I'm not straight. I found out about 5 years ago. Like, did you get a letter in the mail, Alex? Did you get a letter from the gay council that was like, you've been accepted? Congratulations. I wish it was that clear for me. I wish that instead of like a good solid decade of confusion, I had an owl from gay Hogwarts just show up at my house and be like, boop, here you go. You're in house disco. Well, welcome. So I'm very happy for you, Alex, that you are coming to me from a place of solidity in terms of your stuff. You know what's going on in your life. You've got 5 years of gay experience, and you are on your way to becoming a fully formed gay adult, and you've already done some coming out, and there's just this little thorn in your side. Just this little thorn in the shape of dear old dad. Now, I don't know what your relationship is like with your father. right? I don't know how you and Pops get along. I don't know if your lack of enthusiasm around coming out to your dad comes from something else in the relationship causing that trouble. And I guess maybe that's where I would start if I were to give you advice. Before we get onto the like obvious obligation stuff, I think that you know your relationship with your dad the best. And it seems like you were able to come out to your brothers and your mom and your stepdad, right? You have relationships in your life that you feel comfortable coming out to those people, right? I think we all have this. And by we all, I mean the gays, right? Queer people develop relationships at a different pace with one another and with the straights and with our family and with our coworkers, right? It's not like every relationship, all of a sudden you're like, okay, time to leap out of this gay cake and say, hooray, I'm here, I'm queer. Everybody gets the announcement, right? Instead, we come out in gradients, mostly. Some people I'm sure have those parties and some people love jumping out of cakes. So you know what? Do it if that's your thing. But I think that for me and for a lot of people that I know, the experience is a lot more like Alex's, where we come out gradually as a gradient. We come out to the people we're closest to. We come out to people we're in intimate relationships with. Then we come out to acquaintances. And then we come out to coworkers until we get to a place where we're kind of in this like, well, I'm out now and I'm not hiding the fact that I'm a queer person and I feel comfortable, walking around in public, holding hands with a person who's gendered the same as I am, not worrying that people are like, oh no, a gay, right? Like you get to a point where it's too dispersed and you no longer feel like you have to have that conversation with every single person that you meet, right? It's not like in the grocery store, you're ringing up your iced tea and you just like say, oh, cool, thanks. Here's my credit card. Also, I'm gay. It stops being a thing and just becomes part of the tapestry of your emotional existence. But sometimes along the way, people get left behind, right? We have this idea that, okay, cool, like I'm out. I'm an out person. But maybe you never had that conversation with dad, right? Maybe you had that conversation intentionally with a bunch of people, but something stopped you when it came time to have that conversation with your dad. And I guess what I would suggest is thinking about that, because this doesn't sound just like a coming out thing. This sounds like a relationship with your padre type situation. So what is it? Do some reflection, right? Do some journaling, meditate. I don't know, whatever helps you think about what's going on in your life, but ponder on the nature of your relationship with your father, right? Because it may be that there is a snag in that relationship somewhere. It may be that there is a reason that you don't feel like you don't feel like you're safe or comfortable doing it, right? So that can be tricky, right? That can be a hard thing, especially because you're in this situation where maybe you've already come out to a lot of people and it feels like going back, or you feel like you should have done it already. There's a lot of language in here, Alex, about responsibility, owing people things, obligation to them, right? It doesn't sound to me like you're saying, hey, I wish that I could come out to my dad so that we could be closer. Or, hey, I wish that I could come out to my dad so that I could, I put him in the same place in my life as all the other people that really know me. I want him to be able to see me. The language that you use here is like, well, I guess I should do it, right? Like I have to. And you're exhibiting a little bit of anxiety around saying, regardless of how he receives the news. So I would sit down first and foremost and think about what it is that is stopping you from doing that and how valuable it is for you as a person. Because I think we can think of coming out as these kinds of performative, like life events wherein we take center stage and have to announce to the world our personhood, right? We have to tell everybody, hey, this is a thing that's true about me. I am coming out to you. It's this mythologized event. And I think that instead you should think about how it benefits you. Take a moment to be selfish about it, right? Alex, think about, how does coming out to my dad make me feel better than not coming out to my dad? And if there's no reason, if you're like, I can't think of any reason that isn't just doing it for dad's sake, then maybe you don't need to do it at all. Now, if there is a reason, right? If you feel like you would benefit from coming out to your dad and having that conversation, if you think that that's a conversation that will benefit you and your relationship, then okay, do it. And don't think about it being too late or like, well, you're the last to know, because chances are pretty good, depending on the relationship your dad has with people you've already come out to, chances are pretty good this isn't going to be a surprise. So what you're doing is not informing your dad of anything. You're not sitting down and saying, hey, dad, did you know I am gay? And he's not going to be like, oh, my God, I had no idea. Because at this point, it's been 5 years. You've come out to some of your family members. People are inveterate gossips. Chances are pretty good that your dad already knows. This isn't a conversation about new information, which makes this conversation about inviting your dad into that part of your life, right? And that's the other thing that I think that we overlook coming out as. It's less coming out and more inviting in, right? It's less that we are bursting out of the closet and saying, check it out, I'm a gay. And it's more opening the doors and saying, hey, this is my like lived internal life. I've been hiding a lot of it from the world, and I would like to invite you into it, right? Come see what my life is really like. And to that end, I think that if we think about it that way, then it becomes less about obligation to give something to someone else and more a positive opportunity to invite someone into an intimate space that by nature isn't always safe to invite people into, which is itself an act of trust, right? So hopefully your dad, when you do this, if you do this, hopefully your dad recognizes it as that. There are definitely people that I haven't had that conversation. I haven't come out in that kind of like, hey, friends, we need to talk, right? For me, it's a lot more that granular experience of like, well, it's just a part of who I am and I talk about it all the time. And so obviously I don't need to come out to you. So you might be at that place with your dad already, but I definitely haven't had that conversation with some people who you might ostensibly think deserve it. But the thing is, nobody deserves anything, right? It's up to you to judge whether coming out to your dad is beneficial to you and to your relationship. If it's going to make you feel closer to your dad and that's something that you want and it's going to improve that relationship, then do it, right? Go for it. But if it's just like obligation, you're checking a box, right? If all you're doing is making sure you've got the list figured out, maybe assess that a little bit. Because again, it's not like if you bring a guy home, it's not like your dad is suddenly going to be like, what? But if you want to build this relationship and you think that your dad might need a little bit of attention before you get to that point, right? If you feel like your dad needs a little help getting there, then yeah, bring it up, right? Have that conversation. But do it for you. That's the thing, right? Do it for you and what makes your life as a young gay better. And keep in mind too, friend, and I don't mean to patronize here, but you're just a wee baby. You're only 19. You have your whole entire life ahead of you and much of your dad's life, unless your dad is somehow like 90. But there's so much life ahead of you. So don't rush to do a thing just because you feel obligated to do it. Give it time, right? Coming out is not a singular event. Coming out is not it's not a gay bar mitzvah, right? It's not a gay debutante's ball. Okay, maybe sometimes they are, but it's not like a mandated event that everyone has to attend. You do it over time, gradually. coming out is a slow gradient where you fade from straight to gay. You cross that line gently. And sometimes you bring everybody you love with you, and sometimes people get left behind. But it's not about telling them. It's not about telling people that you are gay, right? That's not what coming out is about. Coming out is inviting people into an intimate and dangerous place in your life and trusting them to see you for who you are. So do it for you. And you know what? If you want to have a big gay party with your dad and all your friends, then go for it. Invite dad to the big gay party. But you know your relationship with your dad better than I do. Think on it. Understand why you have hesitated. And if there's a real reason, right? If there's like a deep-seated reason you do not trust your dad with this information, maybe don't ever come out to him. Maybe you don't have to have a relationship with your dad at all, but it sounds like you do and that you want to and that you feel at least a little bit like this would be beneficial. So figure out what's been causing you to hesitate. Get some counseling, right? Talk to a therapist about this if you can afford it. And hell, maybe have that conversation with a third party, right? Like maybe if there's stuff you and your dad can work on in your relationship, maybe invite your dad into that therapeutic environment. Maybe be like, hey, Dad, here are some things that are concerning me about our relationship. And if your dad's willing to build on those, you can build that intimacy until you get to a place where you feel comfortable saying, guess what? I'm gay, right? So yeah. It's about the relationship between you and your dad more than it is about coming out, but I think that we all have a sort of struggle with this desire for there to be a sexual identity, gender identity playbook that we can draw plays from, and there isn't one. So you got to come out in your own way, on your own time, to the people that matter to you, and that list is going to shift over time. You don't have to do anything. You owe your father exactly nothing. Your dad owes you patience and respect and care. And hopefully he's just waiting to be invited into that conversation. Hopefully you're going to be like, yo, Dad, it's time. I'm gay. And Dad's going to be like, I love you. And that'll be that. I hope. But you got all the time in the world. Think on it. Make sure that it feels safe for you. And if it does, go for it. And hopefully your dad's going to be a cool dude about it. Because that's not the experience everybody has. All right. Big question from an anonymous question asker. So our anonymous question asker says, I've recently been told by a friend that cuddling is okay when I visit their house. I totally want to cuddle them, and I get the feeling that both of us want to do a bit more than that. My question arises from the fact that this person is in a polyamorous relationship with 2 other people already, whom they live with. I haven't got to know these other 2 people very well yet, and I don't think I would want to have the same kind of relationship with those people as I have with my friend. What would be the best way to approach talking about expectations and starting a relationship, however casual, with somebody already involved with non-monogamy? I want to make it clear I don't have any problem with them being non-monogamous, but I also need to establish I don't want to be expected to form any kind of relationship, physical or otherwise, with their other partners. I don't mean to imply that would be an expectation. I just want to know how to communicate which expectations I explicitly don't want to have put on me. Please forgive me. I know, right? I'm all blurry right now. Please forgive me if I messed up any definitions or terminology or misunderstood anything about non-monogamy. I think I have an okay understanding of it from what I've heard you and my friends say. I just want to be sure. So, okay, let's talk about this for a minute. So, Anon, I think they have done a pretty solid job talking about this now with me. Like that block of text, that's a great place to start, right? Just go ahead and take that information and convey it to this person. But let's talk about this as like a larger thing, because I think this is a pretty common experience, right? We're talking to somebody, our anonymous question asker here, and they're entering into a situation that they don't fully understand. They want to treat it with respect, but they also don't know what to expect from it, right? Like there's a lot of really interesting language in here around like, well, I like this person and they live with these other 2 people and they're in relationships with them. am I going to have to be in a relationship with everybody? Is that how this works? I have to say, if your non-monogamy relies on any new person being intimately connected to the entire network, you're not in a non-monogamous relationship. You're a member of the Borg. And I need you to get out of here because you're terrifying. Some non-monogamous relationship clusters are the Borg. Sometimes this is how it is done. And personally, the idea that to have access to a singular person, I have to then immediately build deep, intense relationships with several other people, immediately to me is a red flag. It's a pretty big red flag, right? And I think before you get into anything else, before we even start thinking about whether you're going to be absorbed into the non-monogamy hive mind, we should talk about what your relationship is with this person, right? So like, you want to cuddle them. They told you cuddling is okay, which feels like not enough information. Like, okay, sure, maybe there's more to that conversation. Maybe you're just shortening it for me because that's the only way we can make this shit work. But I would talk about that a little bit more, right? Does this mean I would like to cuddle with you and we want to do some sex stuff together? Is it I've discussed it with the hive mind and I am allowed to sexually interface with you? Like, there's a lot of uncertainty there. So I would talk about that with this person and be like, so tell me about your other relationships. Tell me about your non-monogamy situation. This is like non-monogamy foreplay, honestly. This is how non-monogamous people are. We love talking about this shit. We love being like, hey, let's talk about how our interactions are going to work. Let's talk about how your relationship works. Like, what stuff is going on? Because we've all done this work to kind of like develop our own relationship style outside of what's normative. And so we love talking about that shit, right? It's being invited to talk about essentially like the most important thing that we've developed in our social lives, right? So if you sit down with this person, I wish I had a name for them, but I'm just going to call them this person. If you sit down with this person and you say, hey, so cuddling is okay, is like a pretty nice start, but it's definitely not enough information. Like, do you mean you want to cuddle me? Do you mean that you've been given permission to, but you're not sure if you want to yet? Like, let's talk about that. And you can tell me what the sort of flow of authority in your relationship looks like. Now, as was pointed out by Null Arc in chat, I think that there are, because again, and I've talked about this like multiple times, because non-monogamy is simply the absence of a pre-existing monogamous structure, it can actually in practice be a myriad of relationship dynamics. It can represent a ton of different stuff. So maybe this household, maybe they are all in a committed, non-exclusive sexual relationship with each other, and you are only allowed to cuddle with this person because it doesn't violate the safety boundary that they've put up, right? Maybe it's that. Maybe they all have relationships outside of this core nesting relationship. Maybe there is some kind of like complicated veto hierarchy. Who knows? Unless you ask, right? You're never going to know unless you get a better idea of what that looks like. So I would look at this as an opportunity to build your relationship with this person and understand kind of like what is up with them, right? It's a great conversation to have. People love talking about their relationships, and just like gently invite them to tell you more about how their life works. And then that should give you some context and should throughput you pretty easily into what do you mean by cuddling is okay? Do you want more than that? What are you interested in? Be upfront, have that conversation. Because it might be, even though the feeling is that you just want a bit more, like you want to do sex stuff and you think they do too, maybe they don't, or maybe they're not in a position to be able to. The best way to approach talking about expectations and starting a relationship with somebody already involved in non-monogamy is just to invite them to tell you about what their expectations are, what their boundaries look like, what their existing relationship stuff looks like. And while they're telling you about that, think about how that affects you. I will say this, and this is a thing that I feel like is really important to talk to people who are not fluent in non-monogamy. And I don't know, maybe I'll catch some flack for this, but in my personal experience, any relationship in which a third party is able to, without your consent, decide what you can or can't do, when you can or can't do it, isn't really a good relationship. Like, for example, if you're having this conversation with this person and you're like, so cuddling is okay. Do you mean you want to cuddle? And they're like, yes, I would like to cuddle with you. And you're like, awesome. And so you do, and it's nice. And you're like, later, hey, so that was nice. Do you want to make out? And they're like, I really do. But another member of my unit has told me I am not allowed. That to me means that this is a situation in which people are they're not being empowered to make their own decisions. There's a big difference between people having boundaries and people making rules for one another. Because now what's happening is that your relationship with this person is being influenced by an outside power you have no access to, right? This is someone else telling you, you can't do this by way of this person. And for me, that really bugs me. I wouldn't get involved in a situation like that where I needed to get approval from another party to be allowed to do things. Now, there's a lot of that stuff that happens, especially in people who are inexperienced in non-monogamy, or like couples who were monogamous and then shifted into non-monogamy. They bring a lot of that power dynamic with them. There is a lot of weird stuff that can happen in these situations. So what I think you should do is just like get a handle on what the dynamics are in their relationship. How does that work, right? Are you going to be able to be empowered to make decisions and to enforce your own boundaries, knowing that you might be outnumbered, right? Like that kind of pressure is absolutely real, and it totally happens. And in my many long years of life, I've been involved in a bunch of different iterations of non-monogamous relationship. And I've really come to learn that the ones that take people's power away by enforcing behavioral rules are never as strong and never as positive as those that openly discuss boundaries and give people the option to consent or not consent to those boundaries, right? So like if the conversation is, I really want to have sex with you, but I'm not allowed, but I really want to, but like, my boyfriend and my girlfriend, they're difficult. They just won't let me, but oh boy, I wish I could. That's really different than, yeah, it would be really nice to have sex with you and it would be cool if we could get there. But right now, my relationship doesn't really empower me to go out and have sex with people outside of this thing. There are biological like safety concerns, right? We like to keep the unit closed, and maybe we could like cuddle a bit first and I could see how I feel about you. And you could maybe, get to know my family and we could, see where this goes. That's very different, right? So like understanding where the boundaries are coming from. Are they personal or are they external, right? Are they enforced? Because I think that it's hard to differentiate sometimes between somebody saying no and somebody saying yes, but I'm not allowed, right? And that can be a really tricky place to be. And you don't want to be in that situation. Yeah, so I don't know. Like you said, Anonymous, you're not implying this would be an expectation, but I think that this is like, it's a real fear, right? I think, honestly, there are subsets of non-monogamy that suffer from this a lot worse. They're like, well, if you want to have sex with me, you also have to have sex with my husband, right? Or like, I mean, I'm thinking traditionally of the very kind of pseudo heteronormative, like swingery stuff where it's like a married couple and usually an unmarried woman. And they're like, you have to engage with both of us and you're not allowed to have feelings. And it's this whole mess. There's a lot of problematic behavior in every kind of human relationship. Non-monogamy isn't like a fix for like, I don't know, sexism, for example, or homophobia, but it does give us the tools to potentially build something better, right? Build something that isn't that. So get to know the structures of this person's relationships. And ostensibly, if you like the person, right? If you like your friend, you want to know more about them. At least that's what friendship feels like to me. Like I love learning new things about the people that I'm close to. And it seems to me like you have that opportunity here, right? To learn and then potentially to get involved in that structure if you want to. But things to be on the lookout for are expectations and demands being placed on you more than one step away. Listen to people, understand their boundaries, but think about what you want and need and what feels good to you. And if they say, yeah, it would be really nice for you to like meet my partners, okay, maybe that's fine. But then if you're getting invited to hang out with them all the time and you're being pushed to become intimate with them in any way, and that doesn't feel good for you, put up your own boundaries. I know it can feel like, 3-on-1 and not in a hot way. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but I know it can feel like it's you versus this non-monogamy entity, this three-headed giant, but all that really matters is your relationship with other individual people, your relationship with this person, with Cuddle Friend, and focus on that, know where that stuff is coming from, and respect your own boundaries, right? And then express them. Just talk about it, right? And I know it can feel scary to be like, hey, so I'm not making any assumptions, but like I would feel really uncomfortable if I felt forced to be friends with people that I don't know, right? If cuddling you and maybe more is dependent on me developing a relationship with your partners and I don't want that, firm boundary. Don't be scared to say that. I'm curious for you. I'm excited for you, Anon, because I think you have the opportunity to get to know somebody better. I feel like you're starting to figure these things out. And I think you are on the best possible first steps, right? You know to ask, you know to understand expectations. You know, I hope to have your own boundaries. I think you're doing great. I think you're going to do awesome. I think it's just a question of putting the work in and making sure that that you take care of yourself, right? Because no relationship is more important than you feeling safe and comfortable. Because if you don't feel safe and comfortable, then what the fuck is the point? What's the point of having relationships if they just drag you down, right? So I don't know, maybe Anon is at the beginning of a beautiful journey, or maybe not. But I hope, Anon, that you feel prepared to stand up for yourself when you need to. So our third question today, comes from Bowen, and Bowen is having some trouble in the workplace. Recently, I got a new job, and I've been getting to know some of the other workers there. There's this one guy who I had a great conversation with about World War II, and I was feeling pretty good towards him. However, since that time, I've discovered, much to my dismay, this guy is a conspiracy theorist at the very least, and almost certainly a neo-Nazi. He said a bunch of crazy bullshit, such as that John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald were assassins working for the Rothschilds, and Hitler invaded Poland to save Germans living in those areas from the Poles. Whenever he says this crazy shit, I am at a loss. as to how to respond, because I have to work with this guy and I don't feel like I can just tell him to fuck off. But at the same time, the hints I've thrown into the conversation that I consider fascism and authoritarianism a bad thing don't seem to dissuade him from sharing his perverted worldview. I'm guessing the best way to handle this would be to have a quiet talk with him at some point, asking him not to share his views with me, though I would be interested to hear what you have to say on the matter. I would also be interested in what you have to say about screening people, as this experience has revealed to me the deficiencies in my own screening process. Thank you for listening. Now, so I'm torn. I'm torn on this issue, and I think I'm seeing some stuff in chat about this too. I'm torn on this issue because on the one hand, it does feel like a not your problem situation. It feels like the kind of thing you would want to go to your manager and be like, so Herman over there is making me really uncomfortable with this weird talk about conspiracy theories and Germany and World War II and stuff. And he's just really like fucking with me. What is the process for taking care of this? Right? How do we handle crazy old Herman and his insane ideas? Right? So, on the one hand, yes, human resources, your manager, your supervisor, whatever. But sometimes your manager is a cop. Sometimes human resources is a snitch. And so, like, you might not be going into a conversation where you have an ally. Because remember, your boss's job is to make the most money out of you while paying you the least, right? Your boss's mandate is to make sure that you and Herman both work as hard as possible for the company. That is your boss's job. And human resources job is larger scale to make sure that human stuff like discomfort or fascist coworkers don't get in the way of productivity. So that's the mental state they're going to be at. So if you go to your supervisor and you have this conversation, keep in mind you are going to have to make a case for why they are being disruptive to those things, right? The HR or your boss, they won't necessarily inherently give a shit. And you might just be told, hey, get back to work. Like, I hope that's not the case. I hope that they can help you. I hope that, and again, I don't know. It's a new job, so maybe you don't know if you can trust these people or whatever. So, the other approach is to talk to this person themselves, right? To go to this person specifically and be like, hey, when you talk about insert crazy bullshit here, it makes me really uncomfortable. Do you think that we could just not talk about that stuff? Could we just talk about work things? Or like, you had this good conversation about World War II, but I feel like that is a conversational minefield. I think that's going to be really, really difficult. So you do have to work with this guy. So you do have to do a little bit of dancing around the like, fuck off Nazi, but you can tell this person how you feel, right? When you tell me about these things, it makes me really uncomfortable. Maybe we could just let's just keep it light, right? I appreciate you're passionate about this stuff, but I don't need to hear it. It's disruptive to my day. It's fucking me up. Whatever you think is the best approach here. I would love to believe that this is something you can just talk to this person about and they will be like, oh, I totally misread you. I thought when we were talking about World War II, I thought maybe you'd be interested in this stuff. I don't mean to come across as a crazy Nazi. I'm bad at communicating. Maybe you'll get to undo all that awkwardness and you'll learn that this person is actually not a crazy piece of shit. They're just theoretically interested in the fact that the world might be flat, right? That is certainly the most humanitarian approach. Let us treat you like you're not garbage to find out if you actually are or not. It seems like this person just might not be picking up the hints, right? I like to believe that people deserve the benefit of the doubt. The other thing that you can do, and this is trickier and it's hard because it's like gossip can be really useful as a concept. Gossip is a thing that communities use to spread information. It can be used to help us understand where we and other people fit into a larger social structure. Gossip is, it's a thing, right? Talking about one person to another person is a thing that human beings do to transmit information. And it's tricky because it can backfire, right? What I'm thinking about here is suggesting that you go and talk to your coworkers about it, right? But you have to be careful about the way you do this because I think there's a big difference between, man, Herman, what a crazy fuck that guy is. Holy shit. What an asshole. Let's all talk and joke about it to like build your cachet with your coworkers and make fun of the crazy history buff. That's not how you want to do it, right? Like, I think that commiserating and saying like, hey, so I was having a conversation with Herman the other day and he said some stuff that made me feel uncomfortable. Have you ever been in that position with him? Like, is this normal for Herman? And you might get, no, he's never talked about any of that to me. But you might also get, oh, yeah. So here's the deal with Herman, right? I want to give Herman the benefit of the doubt here because it sounds like Herman is making you feel frustrated and annoyed, but not in danger. I think that it's possible that Herman might not be neurotypical. This person might be obsessed with specific historical events or facts or conspiracy stories because of the way their brain works. And this might also have something to do with how he's not picking up on your hints, right? That might also be a contributing factor. You don't know Herman that well. So I would, if you have other coworkers that are not Herman, I would find a way to ask them about get them to talk about their experiences, right? Don't go to them and vent. Don't go to them trying to like shit talk Herman, which it doesn't sound like you want to do, but go to them and say like, hey, I know I'm new here and I'm just trying to kind of get to know everybody. And I was having a conversation with Herman and here's how it went for me. Is that normal for Herman? I want to know what the deal is. We can share this information. Invite them to share their insights rather than going to them and talking shit. I think if Herman does not take the hint when it's not a hint anymore, like if you go to Herman and you say, hey man, you got to cut it out with the conspiracy theory talk. It's making me uncomfortable. I don't like it. He'll probably be defensive because most people are defensive in that situation when they're told like a thing you're doing sucks for me. So he might get defensive. He might be annoyed. He might give you the cold shoulder. He might respond in all the ways that people who are defensive about stuff respond. People do this. I've done it, right? Everybody's guilty of this, of like feeling shame when somebody tells you off. But if Herman's a decent person and just misunderstood in these first few interactions, he'll apologize. It might take some time, but he might come back to you and say, hey, I'm sorry. I'm really passionate about this weird stuff. And I can see how it might make me seem in these uncertain times like I am also a Nazi, but like I'm just interested in conspiracy theories. And you may end up having a nice long conversation about World War II again and feeling better about it, right? That may happen. Maybe no one's ever told Herman, hey man, you sound like a fucking Nazi when you talk about this shit. Maybe no one has ever said that to Herman, but maybe they have, right? And you're not going to know because you don't have a history. Right. So I think it's totally reasonable talking to your peers about this stuff if you don't feel immediately comfortable going to Herman. I would save, the more I talk about it, the more I realize I would save going to HR. I would save going to your supervisor until it starts fucking with your work. Because honestly, and this is, I know, so cynical of me to say, honestly, they just won't have a reason to give a shit otherwise, right? Saying to your boss, I feel sad at work, they don't give a shit. They're going to say, well, okay, get over it. But if you say Herman's Nazi talk is making it so I can't do my job, then your boss, then HR will be like, oh, I see. Well, Herman, how dare you attack the bottom line? So again, I don't know where you work. I don't know if it's a big company or a small company. I don't know if it's like an auto shop or a library, but whatever that is, whatever that situation is, try to deal with it as a person first. And if that doesn't work and it is fucking with your work, you can go to your boss. I think the other approach, and I don't know, again, do you belong to a union? Because if you belong to a union, you may have other places that you can go. Ask your union representative what is the process if somebody you work with is making you feel not good, if they are getting in the way of your being a good employee, right? Because your union's there to fight for you if you have one. And that might be a resource, right? So yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky. It's dangerous in the sense that, yeah, like Herman might just straight up be a Nazi. But I think maybe he just doesn't understand that what he's saying. Like, he probably misread that first conversation and went down the wrong path, right? Maybe you were like, yeah, man, I just want to talk about Russian tanks because I'm just really into Russian tanks. And he was like, oh, I thought you wanted to talk about the Thule Society and the Hollow Earth and how Himmler was a sorcerer. I've been in that position before. I've had that happen, right? Somebody starts talking to you about one thing and you're like, oh, they share this weird nerdy interest that I also share. And you start talking about something else and they're like, oh, no, I've never read the books. I just thought maybe you want to talk about the TV show. It was on HBO last night. Yeah, I've only watched like this one episode. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we don't. All right. I went off the nerd deep end. Now, my nerd deep end doesn't often involve Hitler, but you don't know, right? You don't know. So you are in a tricky situation here, right? So I want to acknowledge that, Bowen, and asking for help is a great way to do it. So in conclusion, if you think it would help, go to Herman and be like, yo, dude, maybe you could turn it down on the conspiracy talk. It's making me uncomfortable. And that might work, right? Or he might shout at you in German and then goose step away, in which case you can escalate, right? Like, God, it's so weird because on the one hand, it's like, I'm having a hard time because I don't want to equivocate. I want to give you something concrete you can do. And hopefully talking to Herman is that option. But also, like, fuck, man, on the one hand, humans, right? I want to give Herman the benefit of the doubt. I want to believe that Herman is not a neo-Nazi. I want in my heart to believe that. But on the other hand, fuck, like, if Herman is a Nazi, I just want to tell you to, like, throw him out a window. Don't do that. Don't throw people out windows. It will get you in trouble. You'll get sent to jail. So I don't know. It's going to be up to you how generous a person you want to be. If you think that Herman is a neo-Nazi, then fucking stay away from this guy and just do not engage. If you think this person is an actual neo-Nazi, I feel like you have the opportunity to go to your boss or whatever and be like, Herman is a fucking anti-Semite, man. This is a bad deal. Because it's getting to the point where having a Nazi in the workplace is bad for profits, right? This person could be somebody who is dangerous to the company, but yeah, I mean, talk to your coworkers, talk to Herman, find out if this, because you don't want to get this dude fired because he accidentally misread a conversation with you, right? I mean, yes, he's got some stupid, crazy ideas, but like, yo. So I don't know. I don't know. The problem is also that your boss might also be a Nazi. The point I was trying to get to is that whatever the truth is about Herman here, the only thing that matters about Herman is that you are not here to fix this guy. So do not attempt to cure Herman's bad ideas. Do not attempt to debate Herman. You don't have to do that. You don't owe him or anybody that. If you can work away from this person, if you can tell them they're making you uncomfortable and hope they respect your boundaries, if you can get a better understanding of what the fuck their deal is from the other people you work with and build a support network there, that can be good. But just do not trust the man, my friend. I don't think that your work is going to protect you unless Herman is getting in the way of your business. So I don't know. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that you have a coworker that is like this. This stuff is, it's the worst. And I having worked with like rampant sexists, low grade neoliberal racists, homophobes, and other various forms of asshole my whole life, it doesn't really ever get easier. You kind of have to deal with every situation on its own. And 9 times out of 10, it's just like, okay, Herman, just don't speak to me. Please just work over there in the fucking German history department. And I will be over here. And I do not need to interact with you. And that's sometimes the best you can get, right? Making change, especially when you first start, is very difficult. It sounds to me like you're safe, right? That this guy isn't like coming to your house and harassing you, right? Isn't following you around. Like, it sounds like this is just like a guy with some asshole ideas, and maybe you can deflect him from this path, but honestly, you don't have to. Now, before we close on Bowen's question, I do want to talk about the screening process, right? So how do we, and I guess this is sort of an aside from Bowen's question altogether, but how do we know if people are good people, right? How do we know if somebody is worth having in our lives? What decisions do we make around people's behavior, and how far do we let people go once they've done like fucked up stuff, right? Now, obviously, I don't have answers for you about that, right? Everybody's going to be different based on their situation, based on the kind of thing that is happening, the people around you. Like, I think we all have to develop our own sort of screening protocols. But I will say this, I think that often we save the important stuff for too late in getting to know somebody. I think that out of a fear that we're going to overwhelm them or that we're presuming too much, I think that we can avoid truths that are really important to know, whether we can be friends with somebody or get to know somebody early on. I think asking people about their other relationships, asking people about what they think of important things, right? There are a lot of people who are going to get turned off by politics conversations on a first date. There are going to be people who are turned off by having a safe sex conversation before you have sex with them. And those kinds of people, I feel like, might be a good first indicator of screening, right? If anybody is really resistant to letting you get to know them early on, I think the other thing too is that we can look at the way that people treat others, either their friends or wait staff, right? As an indicator, because sometimes people, when we get to know them, they're acting more than they otherwise would, right? They put up a front, a likable front. I think dating is all about this. It's about putting your best foot forward so people will fall in love with some idealized version of you. Then once they're in love with you, they're stuck and they have to figure out how to tolerate all the real bullshit. I think we should just put most of that bullshit up front as best we can. Sometimes it's traumatic. Sometimes it's difficult talking about, hard stuff. But I think that we need to get comfortable with having conversations that might be kind of weird to get to know each other. I really like when people ask me tough questions the first time we meet. But it can be scary, right? It can be hard to let people get to know you. It can be hard to get to know people. But I think that as a whole, it's easier for us to really get to know somebody if we're open and comfortable about that stuff. I think too, the communities that we belong to can help, right? Now, I don't think that necessarily it makes sense to go out and to vet every single person that we ever meet. But I think that we can share our thoughts and feelings. Again, this goes back to the gossip thing, right? The idea of gossip, the idea of whisper networks, the idea of community being there to have opinions and thoughts about people, right? Because everybody's connected to other people. I assume that when people are interested in like working with me or getting to know me better, they're going to look at my interactions with other people. In the same way, maybe the people that you know other people and you can talk to them about it, right? So screening doesn't have to happen alone. And I don't even think it's about screening necessarily. It's about learning how to get to know people better and then having boundaries in place so that when we get to know them and we find out that they have opinions about Lee Harvey Oswald, that can set off alarms. That can set off alerts for us. Because honestly, I have been in a position like Herman's where I forget that not everybody is like a weirdo nerd like me. And I have alienated or like weirded people out by getting excited about something that I thought was an appropriate conversation, but then wasn't, right? Where somebody would be like, so what do you do on the weekends? And I'm like, well, so I have this Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I'm running with all my friends and there's 12 players and like one of them, they're playing a cleric of Cyric and it's really cool. And like, I get excited about something and then I see on their face that they're like, I didn't actually want to know this and you have just upset and alienated me. Then I'm like, okay, cool. Now I know. I've hit a thing, right? I've hit a wall there with them. So maybe that's what Herman was doing with Bowen. First impressions fucking suck. I think when we get to know people, if we're interested in them enough that we could maybe be friends or colleagues or whatever, we want to give them a little bit of leeway to be awkward. Because God knows that being a person is difficult. But there's a difference between being awkward and being a Nazi. So, Bowen and anybody who's interacting with a tough coworker, you don't have to be friends. You don't have to. Protect yourself. Protect what makes you comfortable at work. And then don't worry about Herman. You're not here to fix him. And you're not here to like be friends with him either. Every job I've ever had, 99% of the people I worked with, I was like, no, I don't need you. We don't have to be friends. I don't need that, you know. But again, and I think this is a great point and worth reiterating in case I wasn't clear about this. Do what is safe for you, right? Do what is safe for you, like physically, right? Like play nice with Herman if you have to, if that's dangerous to do otherwise, right? Not everybody is in a safe place to do that. Do what's going to keep you your job, right? Because that's also a factor for you, right? Do what is safe for you first and then figure the rest out beyond that. Don't just like go in and assume that standing up to Herman is going to be like the best call because I'm not in your position. This is one of these things where I'd rather give you a bunch of options and let you figure out which one is the one that makes the most sense for you. And that goes for everybody, right? It goes for Bowen here, but it also goes for Alex, right? About coming out to dad. You want to make sure that you're in a position where whether it's having a hard conversation or coming out to somebody or whatever, make sure that you're safe first. And sometimes to be safe, we have to make sacrifices and that sucks. We shouldn't, but sometimes that happens. There are definitely people like for me that I have not and will never come out to because it just will never be a safe thing for me to do as much as I'd like to. So yeah, kind of wandered around a little at the end there, back to the first question. But this has been Hot for Teacher. That's how it goes. We talk about 3 different relationship related topics, whether it's coworkers, friends, the Borg hive mind, whatever. And these questions are submitted by you on my website every week. Go to www.adam-koebel.com. There's a Hot for Teacher link. Click it, fill out the form. Try to be succinct, but you know what? If not, I'll try to figure it out. I answer 3 questions every week. And thank you so much for submitting them. Big ups to Alex, Anon, and Bowen today for submitting those questions. I will dive back in and find some more for the next episode. Thanks for coming, everybody. This has been episode 34, Hot for Teacher. You've been great. See you next time.